Before we get started designing our adjustment screw, I want to talk about two different modeling aspects that you need to be aware of when you start your own parts. Now that's the difference between additive and subtractive manufacturing. Now we have a part open and it's called additive versus subtractive modeling. Now this part shows the exact same geometry in two different ways to create it. Now typically when you're machining a part, you start with a blank and you remove material, and that's subtractive modeling. If you're doing something like 3D printing, that's typically called additive manufacturing. When you're modeling in 3D, you can actually do both of those and get the exact same result. You can start with a blank, which is going to be the size of the billet you start with, and you can remove geometry by doing things like extrude cuts or revolve cuts and so on. Or you can start by modeling the geometry you want and not being worried about what you're removing, as long as you understand how you can machine it and the limitations of whatever your manufacturing process is. So if you have this part open, additive versus subtractive modeling, let's take a look at the four features in the tree. We're going to take the end of a tree until you see the hand icon, hold down the left mouse button, and simply drag it up under Boss Extrude 1. We then want to expand the Solid Bodies folder, expand our display pane, and we want to show this body by left-clicking on the eyeball icon. So what we have here is a circular billet. Now if you select the feature with the left mouse button, you get some numbers that pop up on the screen. You see we have a 125 millimeter outside diameter. There also shows a 100 millimeter inner diameter and a 100 millimeter height for the extrusion. If we expand this and we select the sketch, you'll notice that it shows two circles, one that has a 100 millimeter diameter and one that has a 125 millimeter diameter. This single sketch, even though it shows an OD and an ID, created a complete billet. Now, if we again wait for the hand icon and we hold the left mouse button down and drag this below the next feature, you see that we removed some of the material from the top with this extrude cut. And when you select this face, it shows you the original dimensions of the sketch. It also shows you the feature in the tree. Now, what we've done is we've taken the exact same sketch one, if we expand both of these, and we've used it in two instances. Now, what we've done here is called subtractive design. We've started with the original material size, in this case, a blank circular billet, and we've removed material. Now, this is one way to go about designing. And a lot of times, if you're new to the design process, or you really don't have a firm understanding on what the part is that you need to create, sometimes it can be best to start with the raw material and start removing certain information to figure out what you need to get at. Let's go ahead and hide this. We'll drag down to the next feature. And now you'll notice Boss Extrude 2, again using that same sketch 1. Now if we rotate this part around by holding down the middle mouse button, you'll notice that it's hollow. There's nothing in the middle. And if we roll the tree down to Boss Extrude 3, what we've done is we've added back the middle. Now in order to show this, I also want to go ahead and hide this, but I'm going to expand and show sketch 1, and we're going to take care of this a third way. We're going to do the extruded boss base. We're going to select this sketch, and one thing I want to make note of is the selected contours area. If I right click and clear the selection, by default it's going to use both the ID and the OD sections of that sketch. But if you hover the mouse over, inside of these separate areas you'll notice that it shows a red preview. Now these are different areas that we can select to change what we're extruding. In this case, let's go ahead and extrude the inside and the outside a distance of 50 millimeters. We're going to say OK and take a look at what we have. So now what we've created is half of the original boss. We're going to go ahead and again select sketch 1, do an extrude, and this time let's take it up to 100 millimeters. We want to go all the way down to feature scope, deselect the auto select option. We want to manually select the center here. Now what we're doing, and the reason we're doing it, is we're selecting which body we want to combine this with. Now the reason that we have to do this is because we have two other solid bodies. We want to make sure we don't accidentally join them. Now by default in SolidWorks, if those bodies are hidden, like ours are, it will not combine them. But in the off chance that you go back and make changes to this feature, do any edits, and later on down the line, if for some reason those features are shown, you don't want to accidentally combine things you don't want. So let's go ahead and say OK, and take a look at the end result. Now we can go back to sketch 1 and we can hide this sketch and take a look at the geometry of the third iteration of making this part. Now all three of these are identical. Now if I show each of them and hide them, you wouldn't notice the difference between any of them. And there are three different ways that we were able to take care of that geometry, and there are honestly many more. In a case like this, we could also go ahead and do a sketch, let's say on the front plane. And I'm going to just go ahead and do a section view just so we can see. And I'm going to start sketching a line. Now what we could do is we could create our exact same geometry, add the exact same dimensions we needed. And we could take this sketch and do a revolve. Now in this case, we don't want to merge results, but we can say okay. We're going to go ahead and hide everything but the last feature, which is the revolve, and look at the solid body we've created. Now, this is another way, which is specifically helpful when you're dealing with revolved parts, that you can again make the exact same geometry. Now, even if we plan to machine this part from the top and not do it on, say, a lathe, we could still use the revolve feature. And a lot of times, if you have many different steps, this can be a very handy way to create the geometry. What I'm trying to impress upon you here is that there's not just one way to create this geometry. Now, if you decide to do a subtractive type modeling where you start with the original block that you intend to use, start removing material, that can help you avoid mistakes by adding material that you can't machine or you can't get to. If you decide to do the additive, you have a lot more flexibility on how you can create that geometry. You will notice that we used the original sketch several times for the geometry we created, but we also were able to create a new sketch and do both the inside and the outside in one single feature without having to do an extrude and a cut or multiple extrudes to get that same geometry. So keep in mind the flexibility that you have when creating the same geometry in many different ways. I'm going to go ahead and save this. You'll be able to open this part and review all the different options when you want to create your geometry.